They'd stopped calling for help. The SEAL team was cut off, low on ammunition, pinned against a cliffside in a hostile valley where air support didn't exist. Not because it wasn't authorized, but because no pilot in their right mind would fly into that death zone twice. They'd been there before. The same canyon, the same kind of trap, but this time, there was no backup plan, no drone coverage, no scheduled extraction, just silence. Until someone at the forward ops station heard it. A sound, low, metallic, rising fast. It wasn't the sound of a rescue. It was the sound of vengeance, screaming over the ridge like thunder from a wounded sky. Someone muttered under their breath, not daring to believe it. "She's back." And every man on the ground lifted their eyes because they remembered what happened the last time they heard that roar. You're watching the Storyscape, where the myths aren't ancient, they're airborne. Here we tell the stories no one else dares, of pilots who defy altitude, of warriors who don't ask permission, of storms that have a name. So wherever you're watching from, home, the office, the flight line, lean in, because this isn't just another mission. It's the moment hope ran out, and she flew in anyway. The message wasn't supposed to go through. It was sent from a jammed, low-band radio buried inside a crumbling stone outpost near the Afghan border. The SEAL team knew the signal was too weak, the terrain too high, the interference too thick, but they tried anyway, because dying in silence felt worse than dying loud. The voice that came through was barely audible, garbled, broken by static. Bravo 9, contact north and east, 2 men down, requesting, then nothing. No coordinates, no follow-up. At the forward operating post 86 kilometers away, the comms officer stared at the speaker like he just heard a ghost. He turned to the command team. That came from Sector 7C. Everyone in the tent froze. Sector 7C wasn't on any active map. Not anymore. Not since the last rescue mission barely made it out alive. It was narrow terrain, steep ridge lines, winds that shifted without warning. No signal, no satellite lock, and no recovery path if something went wrong. They had lost 2 drones and a Kiowa the last time they sent air cover over that ridge. It was now known unofficially as the Boneyard. Command leaned over the map. No aircraft in theater is rated to fly that corridor. It's suicide. You've got heat signatures posted on every slope, likely RPGs waiting in the draw. And if we wait for nightfall? Someone asked. The SEAL liaison shook his head. They won't last that long. They're already bleeding. They're boxed in. Silence followed. Until the colonel stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He just asked one question. Do we have anyone who's flown that valley before? At first, no one answered. Then, from the rear of the tent, a younger officer said, almost involuntarily, "There's one." The room turned to him. She flew it 2 years ago, solo, under 70 feet. They said it couldn't be done. What's her status? Grounded, temporarily. Directive came from upstairs after the last mission. The colonel's jaw flexed. Where is she now? Elaine Kitt sat on the edge of a rusted airfield bench, watching a Warthog engine undergo maintenance in Hangar 4. She wasn't flying it. She wasn't allowed to. Her name was still on the duty roster, but her access codes were revoked the week after her last canyon run, after she brought a battered, near-failing A-10 back from a mission that should have buried her and 12 SEALs. She didn't argue when they grounded her. She didn't protest when they stripped her flight hours for review. She simply waited. And now, the call had come. Not to her directly, but close enough. A mechanic she trusted gave her a quiet nod. No orders, no details, just a single word. Sector 7C. Elaine stood. The decision had already been made the second she heard the call sign break through static. She didn't need to know who was trapped or how bad it was. The fact that someone had sent a call from the boneyard meant it was already worse than anyone would admit. She walked toward the line of parked aircraft without changing into full gear. Her old Warthog, call sign Fury 2, sat under the overhang, retired from active flight. Scratched, scarred, one panel unpainted from the last mission. It hadn't flown in weeks, and it hadn't been cleared for flight today. Didn't matter. The crew chief on site saw her coming and hesitated only for a moment before nodding once and stepping aside. They'd seen her fly this bird into terrain that should have killed her. If she was walking back to it now, something was about to happen. She climbed into the cockpit like she was returning home. Systems booted up slow. Half the avionics had been turned off for inspection. She bypassed the lockouts, reinitialized diagnostics. Fuel was at 78%. Hydraulics needed topping, but functional. Cannon armed, flares partial, flaps responsive. It would fly. Not well, not pretty, but it would fly. "This is Fury 2, she radioed into the tower, requesting immediate takeoff, emergency response. The tower paused. "Fury 2, you're not scheduled. Who is this?" She didn't respond. She just throttled up and took off before they could stop her. From the tower, one of the young flight officers ran to the window. "Who the hell just took off?" The commander didn't answer. He was watching the screen, watching a single blip fade from radar as the aircraft dropped below detection range. He'd seen that move before. "She's airborne," he said quietly. "And if the SEALs are still alive in that valley, they might just stay that way." The canyon didn't greet her with hostility, not at first. It greeted her with silence, the kind of silence that pilots know is never natural. Not in combat zones, not in enemy airspace. It was the silence of hidden things. RPG crews waiting for heat signatures, spotters watching from behind rocks, traps buried in quiet air. Major Elaine Kitts adjusted the trim manually. The flight controls were stiffer than she remembered. Fury 2 hadn't been updated since her last mission, and she could feel it in the weight of the yoke and the uneven pressure on the pedals. But it didn't matter. She wasn't flying with software today. She was flying with memory. Ahead, the ridgeline dipped into the narrowest stretch of terrain on the route. She remembered this spot, barely 300 feet wide from wall to wall, with wind shear strong enough to knock a C-130 off course. And she needed to fly into that gap at an angle low enough to dodge the thermal lock of shoulder-fired missiles. She dropped altitude to 210 feet, then 190 feet, then 160 feet. Her proximity sensors began to flash. She clicked them off. Useless noise. She didn't need warnings. She needed silence. Behind her, the twin engines of the Warthog roared like beasts. The sound bounced off the canyon walls and came back in waves. Each vibration shook the cockpit slightly, like the aircraft itself was aware of where it was headed and wasn't happy about it. Still, she pressed forward. She scanned the ridges above. Movement, small, subtle. Just the shift of a figure ducking behind a stone ledge. Another blur on the left slope. Heat signatures beginning to cluster on her HUD. They were getting ready, and she was already in the kill box. And she hadn't even reached the SEALs yet. She keyed the comms. "Fury 2 to any Echo units? Do you copy?" Nothing. "This is Stormcaller. If you're still breathing, I'm 10 clicks north and inbound." A burst of static, then Stormcaller! God, it's you! We thought... Yeah, so did they. She pushed harder into the throttle. On the ground, the remnants of Bravo 9 were hunkered inside what used to be a livestock outpost. Sandbags piled into makeshift walls, bleeding team members covered in camo netting, and one SEAL posted on a cliff with a spotting scope, duct-taped to a shattered tripod. He saw it first, a gray blur, wings wide, nose down, screaming just above the rocks. She's here. Who? Her! The rest of the team looked up, cautiously, desperately, and for a moment they didn't believe what they were seeing. The A-10 didn't soar, it dove. It attacked the ground with presence alone. They could feel the air shift as she passed overhead, and then the first cannon burst came. Elaine had locked on to the ridgeline where the heat signatures clustered and fired without hesitation. The GAU-8 Avenger spun up like a chainsaw from hell, and its rounds tore through the rocks with mechanical fury. Dust exploded from the cliff, figures scattered. One RPG team vanished in the eruption. The rest fell back. Contact left eliminated, she radioed. Moving to intercept second group. Stormcaller, they've got another team on the east face. Can't get eyes, they're moving behind rock. Elaine didn't slow down. She didn't ask for confirmation. She knew this terrain better than most maps. She dropped another 20 feet and banked left, hugging the side of the valley so tight that her wingtip brushed dry leaves off the cliff's edge. There, movement at the edge of a boulder field. 4 enemy fighters sprinting between shadows, trying to reposition before the next pass. She gave them no chance. Manual targeting, no lock-on, no computers, just instinct. She squeezed the trigger again, and the Warthog barked fire across the rock. The ground cracked, stone shattered. The fighters disappeared in clouds of dust and fire. Her cockpit lights began to flicker. Temperature rising, fuel down to 52%, stabilizer feedback inconsistent. She whispered under her breath, "Not yet. You hold for me, old girl." Fury 2 shook once, hard, but didn't quit. Not this time. Back at the forward base, the radar showed nothing. She was flying too low, but the audio feed was live. The operations tent stood silent, listening not to commands, but to the sound of her voice and the background chaos in her headset. One officer muttered, "She's alone in there." Another replied, "Not for long," because the SEALs were moving now. With air cover restored and ridge pressure broken, they began their crawl toward the extraction point. Still 2 kilometers out, still under fire, still vulnerable, but no longer without hope. And from above, Elaine's voice came through again, steady, unwavering. "Stormcaller to Echo, I see your route. I'm with you the whole way." The SEAL lead answered with a tone no one had heard from him all day. "Roger that, Stormcaller. Show them what fear looks like." And she did. At 200 feet, the margin for error disappears. Every maneuver becomes a calculated risk, every vibration a potential system failure. The instruments on Fury 2 were blinking erratically now. One of the stabilizer indicators went dark completely, and the left throttle handle had begun to resist. Elaine's gloves tightened on the controls. She knew what it meant. Structural fatigue. The longer she stayed in this valley, the more likely the airframe would collapse under its own stress, but she wasn't turning back. Down below, the SEALs had begun their movement. 3 of them were carrying a wounded teammate between them, one leg gone, likely from the earlier mortar hit. Another was laying suppressive fire against the eastern slope. They were moving toward the evac zone marked as Point Echo. Flat ground, no cover, but the only place a bird could land without triggering a landslide. Elaine made another pass over the valley, dipping lower than before. Her left wingtip missed the rock face by less than 2 meters. It wasn't a stunt, it was necessity. The deeper she flew, the less chance the heat-seeking launchers had to aim. but every pass like that bled the aircraft a little more. She opened her comms. "Stormcaller to forward command. Be advised, I've got visual on Echo Team. Extraction zone is compromised. They'll need cover fire before the birds can land." Static replied at first. Then the voice of a young operations controller came through, strained. "Stormcaller, you are not authorized for active CAS. You are under review. Do not engage." Elaine's lips twitched. "I'm already in the fight. Review me later." "Negative, Stormcaller. Directive is clear. Return to base immediately." She didn't answer. Instead, she banked hard left and lined up another run. At the forward command tent, the room was splitting in two. The regulation side, officers who saw Elaine's flight as a violation of direct orders, argued protocol and liability. The tactical side, those watching real-time combat data coming from SEAL ground units, argued survival. "She's not in this for medals," one of the SEAL liaisons snapped. "She's saving lives, right now." "But if she goes down in that canyon, we've not only lost her, we've escalated. No coverage, no recovery, no jurisdiction." The colonel, silent until now, stepped forward. "No jurisdiction in a canyon we already abandoned once. We left them for dead. She didn't." He turned to the operator monitoring open audio comms. "Keep her frequency clear. If she calls for help, you give her everything." Elaine lined up her run. The eastern ridge was alive with movement. At least 7 combatants, 1 heavy weapon team, and something she suspected was a mobile jammer. That would explain why their GPS mapping had failed on the last mission here. No one had cleared the area before sending the SEALs in. No drone recon, no thermal sweep. That wasn't oversight. That was negligence. As she approached the hot zone, her altitude alarm buzzed. She turned it off. Then she armed the cannon manually. One of the electronic targeting subsystems had shorted out 10 minutes ago, so she was flying this run by instinct and muscle memory. She steadied her breath, then pulled the trigger. The GAU-8 barked its signature roar, and the world beneath her exploded. Rock, dust, debris, screams, distant, scattered. Her rounds had struck the boulder formation shielding the eastern weapon team, and the resulting blasts sent 2 fighters sprawling down the slope. The remaining hostiles fled, ducking behind terrain with 0 visibility. She pulled up hard, then swung around for another pass. "Stormcaller, this is Echo Lead. We're 3 mics out from the zone. You cleared us a path." "Keep moving," she replied. "They'll regroup fast." As she prepped for her 3rd run, a warning flashed red across her heads-up display. "Flare system disabled." She glanced left. The system had shorted out completely. No countermeasures. If someone down there had another heat-seeking missile, she'd have to outrun it or eat it. She flew anyway. Fury 2 howled through the valley, streaking between stone walls, its undercarriage nearly scraping the ridgeline. This time, she didn't fire. She flew high enough to draw attention, give the SEALs breathing room, and pull any remaining hostiles out of hiding. And it worked. An infrared flash lit up behind her. An RPG, maybe worse, launched from the west slope. She didn't react the way most pilots would. No panic, no sharp evasive dive. Instead, she rolled the A-10 into a banking spiral and skimmed the canyon wall, letting the natural curve of the rock break the missile's lock. It detonated mid-air, 50 meters behind her, sending a shockwave that rocked her fuselage but didn't bring her down. Her left engine sputtered. She adjusted the throttle, coaxed it like a wild animal, and stabilized. Still flying, still in the fight. At the same moment, the SEALs broke into the flat zone. "Echo to command, we are at the LZ. Request immediate extraction." The radio snapped to life. "Inbound, 2 Chinooks, 3 minutes out." Elaine heard it too. She circled above the site like a vulture, scanning every visible slope. No movement. No more launches, just smoke. Her smoke. The Warthog was breathing hard. The engines were running hot. Her fuel readout dipped below 32%, and she still hadn't thought once about turning back. She keyed her mic. "Storm caller to Echo. You've got 3 minutes. I'll keep the sky clean." The SEAL lead replied without hesitation. "You already did." She flew one more pass, slow, deliberate. She wanted them to see her, wanted the fighters still hiding in the rocks to know that this canyon was no longer theirs, that air superiority had returned, and it had a name. And in that moment, the last of the dust from her cannon strike settled into the stone, and for the first time in hours, the canyon fell truly silent. But it wasn't a silence of defeat. It was the silence that follows a storm. The first Chinook came in low, blade slicing the dust like a scythe. It hovered just long enough for the SEALs to begin loading their wounded, one by one, covering each other from all angles. The second bird hung back, circling until the zone was declared green. Elaine watched from above, scanning the ridgelines as she banked Fury 2 in a slow, deliberate arc. Her eyes weren't just looking for heat signatures anymore. They were listening, reading the valley's rhythm, and something about it felt wrong. It was too quiet. Not just silent, but staged, fabricated. She'd flown enough missions to know the difference between enemy retreat and enemy patience. This wasn't retreat, this was timing, and she knew what that meant. A trap. She throttled down slightly, adjusted her altitude, and reopened her thermal optics. Her targeting screen flickered once, then stabilized. 3 faint blips emerged near the southern ridge, tucked into shadows that regular line of sight would have missed. Too far from the current LZ to hit the SEALs directly. Unless they weren't aiming at the SEALs. She shifted her focus. No, they were aiming at the birds. More specifically, the fuel tanks. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't even call it in. She dove. Inside the Chinook, the crew chief was yelling for the team to finish loading. The wounded were nearly secured. The pilots were reading green across their dashboards until a warning popped, unknown signature approaching. They looked up and saw her. Fury 2 plummeted out of the sky like a meteor, engines screaming as the nose dropped almost vertically into the valley's lower basin. Then, at the last possible second, Elaine pulled up hard, leveled just above the tree line, and opened fire. The Avenger cannon tore into the ridge like a buzzsaw made of thunder. Rocks exploded. The shadowed figures scattered. But not before one of them managed to fire. A streak of light arced up from the ridge toward the second Chinook, still in its rotation hold. Elaine saw it. She had seconds. There was no time for countermeasures. She'd lost flares 2 passes ago. There was only one thing she could do: draw the missile. She slammed the throttle to max and turned hard, crossing directly into the missile's flight path. The lock shifted. It chased her. She dragged it west, deeper into the canyon, pulling every bit of speed her battered Warthog could give her. In the command tent, telemetry flashed red. Fury 2 has engaged direct pursuit vector. She's leading the warhead. She can't outrun it, someone whispered. No, she couldn't, but she could outthink it. Elaine dipped low, lower than she ever had. The missile was feet behind her, screaming like a banshee, locking on to the residual heat of her engines. She aimed straight toward a stone wall, then pulled vertical at the last possible instant. The Warthog barely cleared the ridge. The missile didn't. It slammed into the rock face with a thunderous blast that echoed for miles, tearing a 10-meter crater into the side of the canyon. Fury 2 shot into the sky above the debris plume, engines coughing but still burning. Elaine didn't speak, didn't cheer. She just breathed once, then turned her aircraft back toward the LZ. By the time she returned, The first Chinook was airborne, and the second was lifting off. Dust swirled in the valley like storm clouds being chased away. The extraction was complete, but not clean. Elaine scanned the southern path again. Something wasn't right. The signature patterns were all wrong, too cold, too inconsistent. These weren't local fighters or rogue cells. Their movement was too coordinated, their silence too deliberate. She switched to encrypted comms. Stormcaller to forward command. Recommend intel sweep on Southern Ridge. Something's down there and it's not just foot soldiers. Copy, Stormcaller. Drone en route. She hesitated, then added, and it wasn't the SEALs they were trying to kill. It was the aircraft. There was a pause. Then, understood. Elaine began her return vector. Fury 2 groaned beneath her. Hydraulics were fading, altimeter flickering. One wing showed microfractures on the readout, likely from the shockwave. But it would make it back. Probably. She didn't care, because something had shifted in that canyon. Something she couldn't shake. The enemy wasn't just fighting back harder. They were fighting smarter. A new pattern. A new rhythm. The kind that didn't come from desperation. It came from design. And as she crossed back over the ridge, back into friendly skies, into the open air where radar could see her again, she knew one thing. The valley hadn't been empty before, and it wouldn't be next time. The landing was rough. Fury 2's front strut buckled slightly on touchdown, groaning under the strain of a flight profile it was never meant to endure twice. The Warthog bounced once on the tarmac before Elaine steadied it and rolled to a halt near the far edge of the field. She didn't wait for clearance. She shut the engines down manually, flipped off the master switch, and climbed out before the ladder was even in place. Ground crews rushed toward her. Some tried to speak, others just stared. She didn't respond to any of them. Her boots hit the concrete with a soft thud. Her flight suit streaked with oil and sweat. She kept walking. A blacked-out SUV was waiting near the edge of the hangar. Two officers in plain uniforms stood by the doors. No rank insignia, no visible badges. The kind of men whose silence carried weight. "Major Kit, you'll need to come with us." She didn't flinch. "Am I being charged?" "No, ma'am." "Then what is this?" "Command review." That phrase meant many things, none of them good. They didn't take her to the standard debriefing room. They drove past it, through a security gate that only opened after triple clearance, and parked in front of a low, windowless building she'd only seen from a distance. It was the kind of structure pilots were told not to ask about. Inside, the walls were bare, the lighting neutral. She was guided down a narrow hallway into a conference room that felt more like an interrogation cell. One long table, two chairs, a pitcher of water, and a single folder placed neatly at the center of the table. Already waiting for her was a man she'd never seen before. Older, composed, with the kind of stillness that came from watching too many people make the same mistake. He didn't rise when she entered. He simply gestured to the seat across from him. "Major." Elaine sat. The man opened the folder without looking down. "You violated a no-fly directive." "Yes." "You entered a classified dead zone without clearance." "Correct." "You engaged without authorization, used munitions off-roster, and commandeered an aircraft not cleared for flight." She said nothing. He flipped a page. "And you saved 6 lives, eliminated 13 hostile combatants, disrupted a new enemy supply chain, and prevented a high-value aircraft loss." Still, she remained quiet. He looked up, finally. his expression unreadable. "You don't seem concerned." Elaine met his gaze. "I've already had the worst day of my life. This wasn't it." The man gave the faintest hint of a smile. Then he closed the folder and slid it aside. "We've been tracking activity in Sector 7C since before your last mission there. It's not just an unlucky valley, Major. It's a funnel point, a testing ground. For what? For enemy behavior, for weapon placement, for pilot thresholds." He paused. "And for patterns in response." She blinked. "You're saying they're studying us?" "Not just you, but yes. And you've now flown into their teeth twice and come back." Elaine's fingers curled slightly. "This wasn't just a rescue. They were waiting for you." There was a long silence between them. The sound of the AC hummed faintly overhead. Then the man reached into a side compartment of his briefcase and slid a smaller file across the table. One without a name, without markings. Elaine opened it. Inside was a photograph, grainy, infrared, taken from an orbiting platform. It showed her A-10 caught in mid-dive during her last pass. But what stood out wasn't the aircraft. It was what stood on the ridge behind her. A figure, not uniformed, not fleeing, just standing, watching. Elaine looked up. "That's not one of ours." "No, and we've seen them before. Same posture, same position, always during your flights." She leaned back. "You think they're tracking me? We think they're testing you." The man closed his briefcase and stood. "You're being reassigned, Major." "To where?" He didn't answer. He simply slid a new patch across the table. Black fabric. No unit name. Just a call sign. Stormcaller. Elaine looked at it for a long moment, not with surprise, but with recognition, because it meant what she suspected all along. She wasn't just part of something anymore. She was being watched by something older than command and deeper than the war. 2 weeks passed. The news cycles moved on. The footage of the rescue operation, leaked but never confirmed, had sparked murmurs across certain circles, though no one mentioned her name. There were whispers in briefing rooms, raised eyebrows in hangars, a few knowing glances exchanged between pilots who had flown long enough to sense when something was changing. But officially, Major Elaine Kitt didn't exist, not as she was. Her records were pulled from the central registry, her missions marked as in review. Her name, like the ridge she flew over, was quietly erased from the active database. Yet she was very much still flying. She'd been moved to a remote facility, one with no runway markings and no standard air traffic control towers. The hangars were oversized, designed to house aircraft that didn't technically exist. The personnel wore no insignia, and every time she walked across the concrete floor toward Fury 2, now patched, repainted, and upgraded, there were eyes on her. Not suspicious, not hostile, just watching, studying, as if they still weren't sure what she really was. Her new commanding officer was never introduced by name. He simply handed her a mission file, nodded once, and disappeared. The file didn't include enemy schematics or target coordinates. It had one satellite photo, grainy, the same type as before, a ridge, a figure, still watching, still standing, different canyon, different region, same posture,
Same silence. Elaine didn't ask who authorized it. She already knew. She suited up like she always did, quietly, efficiently. But something had shifted in her since the last flight. It wasn't adrenaline anymore. It wasn't defiance. It was alignment. Every step toward the Warthog felt like an answer to a question no one else could hear. The tech crew prepped her bird without a word. They knew better now than to ask. And as she climbed into the cockpit, she noticed a new marking painted just below the canopy. Stormcaller. No number, no squadron, just the name. She smiled once, faintly, and powered up the engines. They came to life smoother this time. Upgraded systems, faster start, cleaner diagnostics. Someone had invested heavily in keeping her airborne. But that didn't surprise her either. Whoever they weren't finished with her. Not yet. As she taxied out toward the flight corridor, the comms crackled. A controller she didn't recognize read out her launch approval. Stormcaller, you are clear for departure. No elevation ceiling. Flight path open. No ceiling? She repeated. Negative. You're flying blind. She stared out over the tarmac toward the open sky, then flicked the comms off entirely. If she was being watched, so be it. But from now on, she'd fly like she was the one doing the watching. The Warthog lifted smoothly, climbing hard and fast, slicing through the thin blue veil that hung over the high-altitude range. Elaine didn't look back. She never did. The ground disappeared beneath her. The ridge ahead loomed again. And somewhere in that ridge, she knew was another figure, waiting, watching her, testing the sky's patience one more time. But this time, she wasn't flying alone. She carried every scream of her engines, every soul she'd saved, every name they'd tried to erase. She was no longer part of the war. She was the warning before it began. And above the canyon, Stormcaller roared.